Hi, I'm Jessica Dominic, and welcome to Little History. I decided to start this channel because I'm a huge history lover, and I love traveling to new places with my boyfriend Casey and checking out the historical sites and museums and learning all about local history. I was actually an archivist for a tribal government for a while, and I worked at some libraries, so I really love doing research and teaching about everything that I learn. And Casey and I thought this would be a great platform to share some of the stories that we come across on our travels and connect with people that have the same interests as us. So I hope you guys like this video. If you do, let me know, and I'm just going to get right into it. Today I'm going to be talking about an event in Michigan known as the Burt Lake Burnout. Now, we are all aware that the relationship between the United States government and the indigenous or native people of this land hasn't always been the greatest, to say the least. And a lot of people are aware of some of the larger travesties that have happened against tribes, such as the Wounded Knee Massacre or the Trail of Tears, but a lot of people aren't aware of some other events that don't get as much attention. And one of these events I'm going to be talking about today took place in an area known as the Tip of the Mitt region of Michigan. Now, for those of you who have never been here, I grew up in Michigan, and it is one of the most beautiful states. We have some of the best freshwater beaches, lakes, rivers, forests, trails, and I'm not being biased or anything because a lot of our local economy is based on tourism and is based on people coming to visit our area. But long before these visitors came here and long before European settlement, there was a group of people that lived here, and these were the indigenous people of Michigan, and they were known as the Anishinaabe. The Anishinaabe are the people of the Three Fires, and they consist of the Ottawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi people. And they are hunters, farmers, gatherers, traders, and they often traveled along the inland waterways in this tip of the Mitt area of Michigan. Some Anishinaabe would migrate between the north and the south based on the season, and some would stay in small fixed villages, like the one I'm going to be talking about today, that was located on a peninsula known as Indian Point on a small inland lake known as Burt Lake here in Michigan. This village became known as Indian Village, and it was believed to be settled sometime within the mid to late 1600s. As time progressed and the area started to become more settled and colonized, the federal government eventually entered into an agreement with the Anishinaabe people, known as the 1836 Treaty of Washington and the 1855 Treaty of Detroit. The Anishinaabe ceded nearly 14 million acres of land to the federal government, and in return, they were supposed to receive 1,000 acres of land on Burt Lake, but this never happened. Instead, by the late 1840s, the Burt Lake Band started using its annual annuity payments to purchase back its own land from the federal government, eventually securing 375 acres. They put this land into a trust with the state of Michigan, believing that they were creating a tax-free reservation area. Because reservations are considered sovereign nations, they are exempt from paying property taxes to certain units of government. However, an interpretation of a separate treaty provision would essentially cost the Anishinaabe people their federal recognition and essentially terminating their tribal status in the eyes of the government. And this had terrible consequences for tribes because they had to spend years fighting the federal government back for recognition. And even though some tribes did win back their recognition years and years later, some tribes did not. And one of these tribes includes the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. So now that I've given you some background information, I'm going to get right into the story of the Burt Lake Burnout. On October 15th, 1900, a group of white men from the Sheboygan area of Michigan came to Indian Village on Indian Point on Burt Lake. They were led by a man named John Walter McGinn. Now, John McGinn was a lumberman, he was a banker, he was a land prospector, and he was really well connected in the area. And he ended up obtaining a writ of assistance from the circuit court judge Oscar Adams, and had discovered loopholes in the land acquisition laws, and he ended up buying the land on Indian Point at an illegal tax sale in the 1900s. Because of the earlier treaty provision that had stripped the tribe of their federal recognition, the land on Indian Point was no longer considered reservation, and the band lost this land due to back taxes on land that they weren't supposed to be taxed on anyway. The residents of the village refused to leave, which was when McGinn not only enlisted the help of local men, but also the assistance of the county sheriff, Fred Ming. Now, Fred Ming would later go on to become a state representative and a state senator. So this group of men entered the village in the early morning hours when most of the male villagers had already left for the day to go in and pick up their paychecks from town. And this group of men herded the women, children, and elderly outside on a cold, rainy afternoon in the fall in Michigan, and they doused their houses in kerosene, and they burned their homes and belongings. The villagers were then forced to walk to the closest place they could find shelter, which was about 35 miles away in the village of Cross Village, Michigan, where there was a mission settlement. Sheriff Ming and his deputies and the other men ended up burning the entire village to the ground, only leaving the St. Mary's Church standing because they felt morally wrong about that.
God, people are awful.
It wasn't until 3 years later that the Michigan House and Senate passed a joint resolution that stated that there seems to be at least a moral obligation on part of the state to restore the land to this band of Indians. The resolution then quoted a 1787 federal ordinance that outlined how the U.S. should interact with the Indian nations, and it stated, "The utmost good faith shall always be observed towards the Indians. Their lands and property shall never be taken from them without their consent, and in their property, rights, and liberty they shall never be invaded or disturbed unless in just lawful wars." The resolution concluded that Michigan would set aside up to 400 acres of land for the benefit and use of the band, but once again, this never happened. Even though the government admitted that the land had been taken through fraud, they still did not give the property back to the Burt Lake Band. Instead, they offered them some swampy land a few miles north that was unsuitable for farming or their native way of life. But the band did end up rebuilding the St. Mary's Church on that property around 1908. Since the Burnout, the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians have continued to fight for federal recognition. In 1911, the band sued for control of the land, but lost, and in 1935, they applied for federal recognition, but were once again turned down. The band again applied for recognition in the 1980s, and after an almost 20-year wait, were turned down again, and in 2007, the House Resolution 1575 was introduced to reaffirm federal recognition of the band, with a report accompanying the bill that said the Burt Lake Band has exhausted its administrative remedies, therefore this act is both necessary and appropriate. But guess what happened? The bill still didn't pass. Today, Indian Point on Burt Lake has since been renamed Colonial Point, which couldn't be more ironic. The land has been developed with large homes and summer properties, and the only acknowledgement of the people, the native people who once lived there, is the St. Mary's Cemetery, which is located across the street from where the original St. Mary's Church once stood. And that is the story of the Burt Lake Burnout. If you want more information on the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, I'm going to include some links down below in the description, including some more information on where you can learn more about the Burt Lake Burnout. I plan on visiting Colonial Point soon and checking out the area and filming that with my dad. He wants to go check it out and see what's there now and showing all of you guys. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video, and I can't wait to see you next time on Little History.